Good morning, this is Johan. I'm at it again with another video that has two UFO stories in it this time. And the first one is from the 20th of February 1976, and it happened in Numedal Valley. And there are two witnesses, at least two witnesses to this case, Marianne and Kåre Berg. And the nature of the sighting is a reddish glowing ball. It was reported in the newspaper Verdens Gang. In the article it says, "It came gliding as a shining ball through the evening darkness, illuminating the valley with a reddish glow. It was completely soundless, with no sound of engines. Its course was steadily northwards through the valley, maintaining the same altitude during its entire flight. Then, just before it disappeared, this is what happened. In a flash, red lights were emitted, resembling welding flames pouring out in the darkness. The lights flashed in a series around the light ball, until it disappeared completely. In this way, the newspaper's Verdens Gang begins its coverage of May 1976, about the UFO observation dated the 20th of February the same year. A married couple, Marianne and Kåre Berg, described a shining, flying object, which they observed one calm, dark evening gliding above their farm at Steinsholt and disappearing northwards along the Numedal Valley in the direction of Kongsberg, a small town situated about 65 kilometers west-southwest of Oslo. Steinsholt itself lies 45 kilometers further south from Kongsberg. UFO Norge, at that time NUFOC, Division East, immediately made contact with the Berg couple and borrowed a movie they made of the object for a closer examination. UFO researcher Eldbjørg Fjellberg got in touch with the Department of Astrophysics at the University of Oslo the 26th of May and submitted the film to observer Rolf Brade, known as leading UFO skeptic in Norway. Also present were university lecturers Truls Ringnes and radio astronomer Øystein Elgarøy. Rolf Brade claimed that the film showed the solar eclipse of the 29th of April 1976, but he didn't win full support from all those present. The following is an excerpt from a written statement from the Solar Observatory, Harestua, of the Department of Astrophysics, Oslo. We have measured the blackening of the film with our microdensitometer. This shows that the camera was out of focus, while all the pictures have a light ring just inside the edge of the light area. This is also apparent on copies, the negatives of the movie. If one examines the report of the witnesses, the apparent size of the object is said to be about 0.5 degree, but the film shows it as about 2 degrees. This indicates that the camera adjustment must have been out of focus, which is also indicated by the accompanying diagram. End of quote. The film was also submitted to Captain A. Knudsen and Captain A. Brandsteg, both from the Kjeller Photographic Laboratories. They made the same observations as did the Solar Observatory. The camera had been out of focus. Additionally, they noticed the absence of reference points on the movie. The complete movie was handed to the newspaper Verdens Gang, where it was cut in order to make prints. A team from the alarm section of NUFOC in Tønsberg, it's a Norwegian UFO organization, consisting of section leader Odd Gunnar Rød with Arne Foss and Jan Snekkestad, took a trip to Svarstad the 23rd of May in order to interview the Berg couple. According to Rød, the article in Verdens Gang, the 19th of May, correctly reports the events, but the photo shown of the object is tilted 90 degrees. The dark spot should be at the top. The report of the couple was based on their visual impressions and telescope observation. But it is clear that what they saw visually varies somewhat from what they later saw on the film. It is natural that some details regarding features seen on the object would be more clearly apprehended when watching the film afterwards at the time of the sighting. When Rød on a later occasion mentioned that experts had suggested that the movie showed an eclipse of the sun dated the 29th of April the same year, the Bergs became very angry and said if so-called researcher could not see the difference between a film taken in a dark afternoon during the winter and one taken at daytime of the sun in the spring, then they had little respect for science and researchers. Moreover, Rød says it could not have been the eclipse because immediately after the UFO recording, the film there are scenes showing their son with a new motorcycle, which according to the sales agreement was bought on the 9th of April. Rød himself inspected this agreement. On their return, the team of researchers spoke to county agronomist Kjell Herland, representative in Svarstad for the Institute of Meteorology. Herland was contacted because the Bergs, who hadn't paid too much notice to the affair until after the film was developed, were uncertain of the exact date of their sighting. The Bergs and Mr. Herland had earlier had a chat about the observation, and when Mr. Berg mentioned that it happened on a Friday evening with snowfall later in the night, it was easy for Herland to pinpoint the date. Immediately and without spontaneously, he gave full credit to the honesty of the Berg couple. It was only a pity that, as Herland put it, they didn't dare to talk much about the event, since the people in the valley are hard to convince about such matters. According to Herland's records, the weather that day was identical with Berg's account. Clear weather at midday, fairly cloudy in the afternoon, and a snowfall at night. On the movie, there is a jump. The reason for this is that Mrs. Berg, shooting the film, moved a bit when the UFO glided behind a tree on the estate. Today she regrets that she didn't shoot the UFO through this tree. That would have supplied a point of reference. And here we can see two picture frames of the object. It's quite circular with a strange black spot on the top of it. And here is a drawing of the valley, the Numedal Valley. They lived at the place Svarstad. Wow, pretty interesting story. And I believe there are many cases like this that people almost regret telling their story, telling about their sighting, because no one believes them, They get scrutinized in every possible way, both by UFO researchers and scientists and everything. So, in this case, they were kind of accused of lying. I feel for them, Of course, they became angry, very angry. When only looking at the movie, I don't have the movie. I wish I had. I wanted to see for myself. Anybody out there, if you have this movie, please post a link to it in the comment section so we can take a look. Pretty interesting. Okay, let's go on to the next story. And the title of this one is Was It a UFO That Brought the Engine to a Halt? Date of sighting? Thursday the 26th of August 1976. Location? Lake Målsjøen by Klaebu near Trondheim. Witness Steinar Langeland. Could it have been an unidentified flying object, a UFO that so many people in Trøndelag saw on Thursday the 26th of August 1976? The chief witness Steinar Langeland from Klaebu near Trondheim doesn't know what to believe. But the story he tells former NUFOC representative Kolbjorn Stenodegard is strange enough indeed. Langeland, who usually works as a caretaker at the Hotel Gildevangen in Trondheim, was staying at Lake Målsjøen by Klaebu. a village 40 kilometers east-southeast of Trondheim. On Thursday evening, when the aerial phenomenon appeared, it was about 9 p.m. I had been fishing out at Lake Målsjön during the day and was sitting waiting in the car for Mr. Murk, a goldsmith from Trondheim, who was to accompany me back to town. The engine was running, but suddenly it stopped, and even after 4 to 5 attempts to start it, it was completely dead. Langeland was surprised. He had never before had any trouble with his Mazda. He got out to take a look under the bonnet. As he bowed his head, he happened to look over the car's roof and caught a sight of a shining object approaching over some steep hills near Målsjön. The object seemed to be moving slowly downwards along the hillside, and Langeland emphasizes that it maintained a constant altitude over the treetops. He is not sure how high, but as far as he could estimate, not more than a couple of meters. No sound could be heard, and there was no other noise nearby which might have drowned any possible sound from the phenomenon. The object leveled its flight parallel with the terrain and headed towards the witness. Just at the same moment as the object passed him, not far from the car, and at an estimated altitude of about 30 meters, Langeland heard a crack from the car engine. He didn't have time to react to this, because in order to keep the object in sight, he had to run along the road. The light now turned out to be rectangular, and with completely sharp contours, like a lighted window. Some distance outside the luminous rectangle, he could clearly glimpse a dark shape, that of a large oval. As you can see, he's made this sketch. Questioned, he estimated the size of the shining rectangle to be about 1.5 by 2 meters, the longest size being the horizontals. The color of the light reminded him of a window lit by paraffin lamp, as in former days. From the rear of the dark object extended a rather long tail, which resembled a bar, or rather a shaft of light, with sharply defined contours. Then the object disappeared soundlessly in the fog, and Langeland said he could detect a smell of sulfur. When he opened the bonnet and took a look at the engine, he discovered that 2 of the sparking plugs had burst. On his way back to Trondheim, he had severe difficulties with the engine. An engineering workshop looked at the car, but they couldn't give any explanation regarding the burst plugs. The same workshop had installed new plugs a fortnight earlier. The interviewer got the plugs from the witness and sent them to NUFOC Division East at Lillestrøm for a closer examination. Stenodegard talked with Langeland for a long while, and also on later occasions when additional details were added. He always answered calmly and thoughtfully to every question, with no tendency to dramatize or overdo the story. The sum of Stenodegard's impression is quite simply that he was speaking with an ordinary man who was doing his best to describe an event which for him was real and for which he could find no logical explanation. He seemed surprised by his observation and interested in obtaining an explanation. Mr. Langeland had not previously been particularly interested in the UFO enigma, and he drew no conclusions as to what the object could have been. On one point, however, he would not be moved. It was a constructed and purposefully steered flying object that he had seen. Stenodegard questioned him very carefully about this, but he maintained that the object appeared clearly enough at a relatively short distance that he could be so sure about it. Unfortunately, there were no other known witnesses to this close encounter, but the burst plugs were examined a couple of weeks later by NUFOC Lillestrøm. The final report made by division leader Eldbjørg Fjellberg is as follows. The plugs were submitted to the central engineering workshop of the manufacturer, Bosch. The persons I made contact with had never seen such a break. However, they believed it could have originated due to incorrect use of a plug spanner. A well-known Formula 5 driver and former car electrician stated that he had never seen such clean brake caused by incorrect handling with a plug spanner, and suggested there could be other causes. On the other hand, a close acquaintance of mine at Lillestrøm deliberately broke 3 plugs with a plug spanner to show that such breaks could result from misuse of such an instrument. All 3 new ones had brakes similar to those on Langeland's car, moreover with clean gap surfaces. Both the former Bosch plugs are still conducting electricity and are somewhat bent above the brake. An electrical engineer stated that if external forces caused the brakes, then the car itself would have been smashed to pieces, considering the fact that the plugs also were bent. Is it possible that the plugs were in a state of stressed bending before Langeland's experience, and that the brakes were easily induced, as indicated by the cracks from the engine, by some unknown force from the observed object? This was the content of the final report from NUFOC. This organization is now called UFO Norge. Langeland's story has remained unexplained since that time. No other explanations for the broken plugs have been put forward, so far as the editor knows. What I find interesting about Mr. Langeland's sighting is the smell of sulfur. Not only that the engine of the car stopped, but this smell of sulfur is actually reported several times in the past. People are near these strange, unexplained objects that are flying through the atmosphere. Often they leave a trail of a smell, and it's more often than not reported to be the smell of sulfur. Okay, hope you enjoyed those 2 stories, and I'll be back soon with more. Talk to you later.